All right, welcome back to the show. I am here with the one and only Shawn Wells. What's up, Shawn? How are you?
I am amazing. Thank you for having me on.
I'm so excited you're here. I'm excited to chat about all things supplements and ingredients. But before we get into all that stuff, do you want to give our listeners a little bit of your background? Maybe, just briefly about your story, how you got into nutrition, fitness, and how it brought you to where you are today?
Yes, so I am a biochemist. I have a master's in nutritional biochemistry from Chapel Hill, registered dietitian, certified sports nutritionist through the ISSN, fellow in the ISSN. I've been keto for about 20 years. But all that, man, let's see, where did that start? Like in business school, I was going to business school undergrad and getting a degree in marketing, and creatine had come out, and I was like getting passionate about working out and using like protein and creatine, and I read a book called Optimum Sports Nutrition, and I read some like sports supplement encyclopedia, and I was like just getting pumped on all these ingredients. And I remember going to my doctor, and I was supposed to just get a normal physical, and I was telling him about all this stuff, and I was expecting like, the doctor to say, yeah, all that's stupid, like most doctors would say, but he actually drew out this lifeline for me, and I was 20 at the time, and he drew it out to 80, and he said, why not be happy between here and here? Because he could tell like how pumped I was about it, and I was, telling him that I was in business school, and this is cool, but it'll just be a hobby or something. And he, yeah, said, why not be happy between here and here? And like literally, like what he told me changed my life path. Like I decided to, I finished up business school, but then I decided to go to UNC Greensboro and get a like several years, like 2 years worth of all the classes that I needed, all the prerequisites, all the business classes weren't obviously good enough to get my master's at Chapel Hill, which was my dream school. And it was kind of the opposite scenario. I got there, and the guy there, what's the term? The counselor,
Mhm.
told me, he's like, you're a business student. There's no way that you can do all these science classes. You'll fail, and you'll fail miserably. And I actually almost killed myself that night over that. I was on my own, and I had really worked for years for this dream, and I really wanted to do this at this point, like full out, and had moved to Greensboro for this, like put stuff on my credit card, and he kind of crushed all my dreams, and I really like had contemplated taking my own life that night. It was like a kind of a bad moment for me, and but then I luckily decided to not do that,
Mhm.
and I thought about that guy every day. I took all the classes I needed. I took 26 credit hours a semester
Wow.
and just blew it all out of the water. Got straight A's, got into Chapel Hill, and then became known as the world's greatest formulator. I've formulated about 500 supplements, patented over 10 ingredients, with about 10 more on the way, like things like T-creen and dynamine that are in hundreds of products. Ketones, some of like the RBHB, dihydroberberine, like a lot of these things that are out on the market, with so many more things coming. So just, yeah, I've been very blessed. Like my dream was to like really be like this elite formulator, and it's just kind of crazy how I've ended up here. But like going back to like keto, why keto? I've been keto for about 20 years, a little bit ahead of the curve.
Mhm.
And that was actually because I got Epstein-Barr virus while I was getting my master's at Chapel Hill. And I ended up having like this full-on autoimmune crash with like Hashimoto's and chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia. Like I couldn't get
Oh.
out of bed. I thought I was going to die again. I considered taking my own life because again, my dream felt like it was kind of thrown out, that I'd never be able to work. Like I'd just always be in bed, be in pain, be tired. And I ended up stumbling into the ketogenic diet, and it helped me dramatically, like get rid of like this pain, hit like a reset button on a lot of my autoimmune issues. And then about 8 years ago, I got a pituitary brain tumor, and that's when I got super serious about doing intermittent fasting, paleo, keto, really taking all of my supplements, and then really getting into, biohacking and
Mhm.
and a lot of those aspects. Yeah,
Wow, wow. Well, that sounds like an incredible journey. I've
it
heard a
really
little
has
bit
been.
about it before, but yeah, I wanted the listeners to hear that because, I mean, you have an incredible story and it's inspiring for sure.
Well, thank you.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I want to dive into a few questions I have for you
100%.
regarding supplements. So definitely, I think, especially for a lot of my followers and people listening to this podcast, I get a lot of questions about supplements, and I really wanted to bring you on because I want to kind of, I mean, I hate the term pick your brain, but I really want to just like ask you a few questions about supplements, obviously, and dive a little bit deeper into those. And really, some of the main ones that I get questions about a lot, and just get your perspective on them and your expertise. So, are you ready for that?
Let's go. Let's
All
bring
right.
it.
Okay. So, the first question, which is probably the most detailed question I'll ask, if you had to pick the top five supplements that you think everyone should, or your average person should be taking, regardless of diet, what would they be and why? And we can go through each one, um, obviously, one
Okay,
after the other.
so my first one might surprise you. It's berberine.
Okay.
I really think that is the most important thing that you can possibly take. And I've been on a patent for dihydroberberine, which is the active metabolite for it. It's about 5 times more bioavailable. But regardless of what form you take, berberine's been shown to be more effective than metformin. And metformin has been shown to be anti-aging on a number of fronts, leading to, in one study, they kind of extrapolated it out to what would look like 2.5 years of extra life. So there's very few supplements that you could say something like that for, and berberine outperforming metformin, and certainly dihydroberberine outperforming regular berberine. That would be my number one supplement because glycation is blood sugar damage, and I'm sure you've heard a lot about that and like how keto, can reverse some of this metabolic dysfunction. That berberine or dihydroberberine could certainly help on this kind of this glycation, the advanced glycation end products. So they're actually called AGEs,
Mm-hmm.
and they're aptly named because of the damage that they're causing. And then AGEs can lead into inflammation and oxidation. And glycation, inflammation, oxidation are basically the main ways for aging and disease. And so, just like you hear about, I mean, almost everything is tied to this metabolic dysfunction with biological aging and disease. This is kind of like something that you can do to readily attack that. So not only are you going to live longer, reduce inflammation, reduce glycation, reduce oxidation, but you're going to reduce your risk for almost all disease. Now, if you're keto, it's going to also lower your basal blood glucose and increase ketones.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's obviously helpful. And even if you're not keto, it's something that, again, like, I mean, they've shown metformin or berberine are just powerfully anti-aging. And then if you are keto, It's something that you can use certainly to compensate for cheat meals, let's say. It's crazy. Like when I was first experimenting with it, and I was full on keto, strict keto, and I did this a week apart where I had a glucose challenge or a carbohydrate challenge, let's say. And I made it fun, so it was two frosted Pop-Tarts and five double stuffed Oreos. And my blood glucose was about 60 to 70. And so I did 500 milligrams of berberine one week, and then another week I did just a control, placebo. And the one with the control, I got up to 199 was my blood glucose at 2 hours.
Wow.
And the one where I took berberine, I never got above 100, and at 1 hour I was already going back down.
Wow.
Pretty
Yeah,
insane.
significant.
So this is so powerful. I really recommend that everyone be on it, keto or not keto. You literally could probably get off a lot of medications, and that's, I'm going to say talk to your doctor about that, et
Hmm.
cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it's so powerful as a glucose disposal agent. And another thing that it could help with, like with bodybuilders, for example, is like what they call nutrient partitioning, where it's like via AMPK, AMP kinase, it's going to drive glucose like a higher propensity to muscle rather than fat tissue.
Okay.
So again, like it could be good on like a clean bulk or just any diet in general.
Gotcha.
So that's number one.
Interesting. Yeah, I was not expecting that to be number one, but super interesting. Cool.
Yes, so that's number one. Number two would probably be vitamin D3, and I'll say slash K2 if I can slip that in with it. So I would say take about 5,000 IUs of an oil-based vitamin D3, ideally with a fatty meal a day, and about 100 micrograms of K2, MK7 form, probably preferred, um, again, once a day. And I do like taking it daily. There is some data that shows like while you can take just one large bolus dose, like maybe once a month, like some people do that with injections, it's been shown to have more advantage like with more frequent dosing. Um, there's going to be some variance in how much you need it based on your age, based on sun exposure, based on your skin color, etc. African Americans definitely need more. Um, so they actually run into a lot of issues. There's actually a much higher propensity towards a lot of diseases that may be related to with African Americans with lower serum vitamin D levels. So, and we know right now that vitamin D3 with COVID is certainly correlated with lower COVID risks. So like my top five might differ right now. Like I would certainly have a stack of taking some additional zinc, vitamin D3, uh, mushroom blend of some sort. AHCC is a really powerful compound from mushrooms that has been shown to boost the immune system pretty dramatically and be anti-cancer. It's a really powerful compound,
Mhm.
great research behind it. And then vitamin C, I would look at the liposomal form of vitamin C, getting several grams. If I was actively having COVID, this is just an aside, then I would look at getting a 25 gram like IV of vitamin C and just knock it out.
Okay. And so that's like that was number two plus like immune stack, right?
Right,
Okay. I want to
right.
dive into
So,
just so our listeners kind of understand. So with vitamin D3 plus K2, can you just tell us why exactly you would take those together? just so that they can understand that. And then also, like, maybe tell us why vitamin D3 is so important and why so many people are deficient in it, maybe?
Yeah, vitamin D, it's so fascinating that originally vitamin D we thought was, just a bone vitamin.
Hmm.
And then it's like, whoa, it's not just a vitamin. This is a hormone. And it's part of the hormonal milieu, if you will, like the endocrine system, which the milieu means it's like there's like a hormonal cascade, like every hormone affects another hormone, like a
Hmm.
waterfall. And so vitamin D, we're finding, isn't just a simple vitamin. It's tied into your sex hormones. It's tied into depression. It's tied into like you could literally go through all the sex hormones like beta estradiol, testosterone, progesterone, like down the line, and we're finding that your likelihood to have more body fat or not, your again going back to your immune system, like your gut microbiome, like it's crazy like how this one vitamin is so much bigger. It's really hard to compare it to any of the other vitamins because it really is more like a hormone replacement.
Hmm.
So that's where like again, like I'm not even getting to what I would consider the basics of what most people think of a supplement stack would be, which, probiotic, multivitamin, fish oil, blah, blah, like I can get to that part.
Hmm.
But the first two that I'm getting to are actually bigger picture than that for
I
me.
gotcha.
So, and really one thing that you need to worry about with like just taking, people used to take a lot of calcium, but to help with bone strength and bone mineral density, especially women that are aging that may not be one have as much muscle mass, that may be a little bit more sedentary
Hmm.
potentially, that might not have enough estrogen, beta estradiol, or estrone, then they have higher risk for osteoporosis, et cetera, et cetera. So calcium supplementation is very popular, but a lot of this calcium supplementation was leading towards actually greater cardiovascular disease risk with calcification of arteries because there wasn't enough vitamin D3 and K2 present to make use of that calcium to go towards bone tissue.
Hmm.
Add to that, if you're obese, potentially, they've shown that the greater your obesity, that a lot of these fat soluble vitamins will actually kind of hide out
Hmm.
permanently in your adipose tissue. So sometimes you can be taking plenty of D3, and that's where taking like K2, like they work synergistically. That's where it's ideal as well, that it's not hiding out and it's working correctly with the calcium, etc. But again, D3 is just so powerful in so many ways, and then K2 is also like an anti-clotting factor, helps with like blood circulation, cardiovascular health. That I think that's ideal to take as well with the D3.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay, and just so our listeners know, the difference between fat soluble and water soluble vitamins, the fat soluble ones are A, D, E, and K, and then
Right?
the rest are water soluble. And so that just means that, and you recommended this, taking those, like for example, taking vitamin D and oil base with a fatty meal so that it can be absorbed properly. Correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Exactly.
just wanted
You're
to
dead on.
yeah, just I mean, it's something that you think would make sense because of fat soluble water soluble, but it's something that a lot of people don't know. All right, so that was number two plus a stack. So what is number three for your top five?
All right, now I would probably get to like some foundational basics of what people usually think. But when I say multivitamin, I do not mean a like one a day from some company that's like the Centrum type of thing like that. Like you probably need like at least 4 capsules a day minimum to get enough of these macro minerals, things like calcium and magnesium and some of those things, at least. And then I'll say with minerals, you want to look at like organic minerals. So things like citrate, malate, or like amino acid chelates like glycinate and things like that. Like you want those versus things like oxide or carbonate. Those are very cheap forms of minerals. The organic forms are much higher bioavailability. So even though they may say like that percentage that they give of the daily value is the elemental level of that mineral. And even though that might be the same elemental level, there could be a several fold difference in how it gets absorbed in your body, which unfortunately isn't really taken into account like on a supplement label.
Okay.
So look for that. Then another thing to look for, and this is definitely going to be in a premium multi and really set it apart, is coenzymated B vitamins. So these are the active forms of the B vitamins. So with B12, for example, instead of like a cheap form like cyanocobalamin, which you might find in some breakfast bar or cereal or whatever, it would be something like methylcobalamin. And one that's really interesting that gets a lot of attention and a lot of people have genetic issues with is folate, right? You've probably heard about that because there isn't just one enzymatic step to get to the active form of folate. There's 4 enzymatic steps. So there can be a lot of genetic issues in getting to the active form. So you could be taking enough folate or folic acid in your supplement that you think you should be good, but you could actually be anemic because you're not converting it to 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate, the active form of folate. So getting these active forms is going to be ideal. Like for B6, that would be P5P and things like that. So
And
instead
would
of
that be,
pyridoxine.
oh, sorry, would that be labeled you said, would it be the methylated form of that? Is that what you
Exactly,
would
yeah.
look for on the label or, um,
Yes.
okay. Okay.
Yep. Exactly. And so that would be really important to look for. Um, I would stay away from ones that have like other stuff in them, some proprietary blend of some herbs and this and that. Like, you don't need that. And I really hate proprietary blends just in general. That would be one of my biggest red flags of a supplement that you shouldn't probably use. Because one, you can't really send it out for testing, so you don't know whether they have the active level of whatever's needed in there. You can't check to see in a study, is there the right level that's supposed to be in there? And then in a proprietary blend, you have to list them in order of descending mass. So you'll see a lot of times a proprietary blend is just a way to list a lot of things that people think, oh, it's cool, it's got that, but pay very little.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's a sneaky trick. And so like they'll have like the cheapest ingredient first in that proprietary blend and the most expensive ingredient last because it's in order of descending mass. So they'll have something like creatine, which maybe is, a great ingredient, but they'll have that first because it's only $4 a kilo, and then they'll have some ingredient that's thousands of dollars a kilo listed last, but then you're thinking, oh, it's got all the ingredients I need. I like full transparency where you can see the form of the ingredient, the genus and species. So like if it's an herb, you want to see genus and species. You want to see like the part of the plant, like the root, the flower, the stem.
Can you give us an
You,
example of that?
yeah, like so for ginseng, you would want to see like its ginseng root instead of like if it's the whole plant, they could save a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
So you want the ginseng root, and then you want ginsenoside A or something. It needs to be standardized to something. And then for ginsenoside at 5%, so it delivers X amount of active. And then you can go look up at the study and say, okay, this has the right dose that it shows in the study. And that full, and then, like I said, with that full transparency, then they have to be sending that out to a lab to be tested at that level that's listed on the label. So it's more expensive to them to have, not only is that raw material way more expensive, but then they have to be testing against it as a raw material before it goes in the product, and then testing against it as a raw material after it goes in the product. Then they have to test it at the 2 year shelf life point, and they have to do what's called like accelerated stability work to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that it stays at the right level for the full shelf life, because ingredients can interact
Mm-hmm.
and change levels. So sometimes you have to put in overages of ingredients. So a lot of work goes into actually meeting the shelf life. And so that's why I like, a brand like Thorn or Now or some of, like these really well-known, trusted brands, because they have the quality control team and they've been around for, 20 plus
Mm-hmm.
years, and, clinicians trust them, and, you get what you pay for. And
Yeah.
I would rather be sure I'm getting the ingredient and also be sure I'm not getting things not listed on the label. That's another concern. If something is mixed up, maybe in a cheaper, less CGMP, FDA inspected facility, you may be getting, heavy metals. You may be getting stimulants. You may be getting like things that you don't want in the product as well. So
Okay.
a multivitamin is literally one of the hardest products to do. You have to spend several years working on just how all these ingredients interact with each other. And it takes so much work and so much time and so much money. It really can't be underestimated. I can tell you it just takes a lot of work. Each ingredient that you add adds complexity to the stability because they all interact with each other. And B vitamins in particular can be like less stable around like heat, light, etc. So
Mm-hmm. So basically, what you're saying, like if you go into a CVS or a Rite Aid and you see a shelf full of multivitamins, most of those are just like expensive pee, or not even that expensive, but you're just, that's what I refer to. You're just paying to pee it out or not even absorb it because who knows what's in there. Um,
yeah, I agreed. Yes, like I
okay.
would definitely be buying like something that's, and you know what? Like if you're going to experiment, like at least start with like the really, really, really good stuff and say, that's my baseline. Now I'm going to try something else and see if I feel as good on it, if my labs test out as good on it.
Okay.
Like that's where I'd go. Like I wouldn't start cheap and then say supplements don't work.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
And another question, well, not question, but well, kind of question. So, and this is something that I get to, like, if I do recommend some type of supplement or multivitamin or whatever to clients, and they see like, oh, 6 capsules is one serving, and they're like, is that right? And I'm like, yeah, because think about it logically. Most multivitamins that you see, on that CVS shelf, it's like one capsule and you get all of these things. But how in the heck is it? Like, how do you get an effective dose into one capsule? Like, that just doesn't, it doesn't logically make sense if you have all of these ingredients, right? So I think that's something that a lot of people need to realize, that, yeah, if it says take 5 or 6 as a serving, that's probably more of a legit one than if it was one that just said, here, take this one capsule and get your entire, multi day or multivitamin for the day, right? Does that
exactly.
kind of line up? Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
but you can divide up those capsules throughout the day. The reason they have to list it that way is you can't say take 2 servings a day, because then they'd have to list everything at half the dose.
mm,
So they're trying to list like everything at full dosage, but you can divide it out. Just make sure you're getting at least the 6 caps a day.
okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And while we're kind of on this subject, because this is a question I had for you, how, if you're someone who's like, okay, I'm looking into whatever the supplement may be, I want to, take a supplement. I'm not going to like give a specific one, but how, if I was going on Amazon or in CVS or whatever it may be, is there some type of like stamp on it or like third party tested or some type of thing that I should look for besides, I mean, you said just go with the brands that have been around that are known, and a few of the things that you mentioned, but if there was like one thing that people should really pay attention to or maybe do their research on, what would you recommend for that?
So yes, so no proprietary blends.
Okay.
That's the biggest one. The trusted brand, like I love the ones that have been around like at least like 20 years, like I'm saying, like Thorne, Now, Jarrow, Doctor's Best. Um, I mean, I could go through some more, like, or people certainly feel free to direct message me at Ingredientologist,
Mm-hmm.
and I will answer anyone's question anytime. Um, then I would look at, is there too many ingredients? Okay, like going back to that, like this kitchen sink stuff. Like if there really is a formulator behind this, what you want is complementary mechanisms of action. Instead of having, oh, I've heard of that, there's 10 blood sugar ingredients in there. Why is there 10 blood sugar ingredients in there? There should be like one ingredient that works on one mechanism that's in the right form, that's at the right dose. And then if there's another ingredient in there, it's working on a different mechanism of action and it's in there for a reason. So, like, I really start to get leery of like supplements that go beyond maybe five ingredients, because it just stops making sense. Now, obviously, with a multivitamin, that makes sense that you have to do it that way. But typically, like, if it is something like, an immune product, or if it is, a blood sugar product, or like whatever, even like a pre-workout, like, I like keeping it super simple and clean so that you can
Okay.
track the ingredients and you shouldn't be taking too many things. I mean, the whole scientific method is taking one thing at a time, evaluating its purpose and evaluating its efficacy, and then saying, yes, this works for me, and then move on and, add something else. So those would be
Makes
some
sense.
things I would look for. I would certainly, if you're on like Amazon, look at reviews, things like that. Obviously, reviews can be manipulated, but if there's a lot of bad reviews, then that's certainly a sign to
Yeah.
look at. But yeah, I like, the trusted brands, full transparency, all that kind of stuff.
Okay, cool. Sorry. Um, I guess my other question with that, while we're on the multivitamin subject,
Yes.
so there's some people, especially like within the past, I know I've just seen the past like year or two, are sort of replacing the multivitamins that they may have took with either a greens powder or now it's like liver is the new like multivitamin. What is your take on both of those, and does that make sense or does it not?
No, I would
Okay.
say both of those don't make sense. Liver, I would say the liver, one, regenerates itself very well if you are healthy. Now, there may be times that it might make sense to take something to kind of boost the liver's ability to regenerate itself. Like if you've been under significant duress, maybe drinking heavily for like, I don't know, a week-long bender or something. But, things like silymarin from milk thistle, N-acetylcysteine, which is a precursor to glutathione, some of those things might make sense. Unless you have like, medication that you're taking that, you know, maybe puts like a consistent strain on your liver, I would think that that's not necessary to take the liver supplements. Um, and then as far as greens, I mean, there's value to taking some greens, but what I don't like about those formulas is there's way too many ingredients. They're not standardized. You don't know where all of them are coming from. Are they, organic? Um, what's there's a lot of chances for heavy metals in a lot of the greens that may or may not be tracked.
Hmm.
I would much rather just be getting whole food in that case. Chlorella is kind of an interesting ingredient that's getting some research. I mean, there's some greens that I think are interesting. Spirulina, blue spirulina, people have looked at that
Okay.
has some antioxidant potential, but in by and large, like I would say, just eat your food.
Hmm. And would you say like, because obviously with the carnivore movement and organ meats and all of that kind of
Mm.
resurfacing, can't say that word. Do you feel like, because I know a lot of people say like organ meats are nature's multivitamin, or you should be eating organ meats. You don't have to, you know, take supplements if you are getting all the vitamins and stuff from organ meats. What's your take on that?
Whew, that is a very complex one because, oh man, there's so many things I could say about that. You're certainly getting your fat-soluble vitamins from if you're taking liver, like going back to what you were saying before, the ADEK. Um, you have much less need for uh, oxidation and therefore antioxidation when you are on a ketogenic, especially a carnivore diet.
Okay.
Okay? So when you're in ketosis, it's very different from when you're on a carbohydrate fuel-based diet and you're generating like it's heavily oxygen based and therefore free radical generating to generate the ATP through the Krebs cycle, the TCA, whatever you want to call it. So someone that's a carb heavy dieter, and that would include like herbivore animals and certainly most people, that you need more antioxidants. So to battle the oxidation that's happening naturally. And if you're a carnivore, you therefore need a lot less. And that's something that isn't taken into account. A lot of these studies that show benefits of certain antioxidants, um, they're not looking at like a difference in diet like that, like how much of the free radicals are you generating?
Mm.
So that's a really interesting
Yeah.
point. And then there's things like oxalates, phytates, lectins, all these anti-nutrients that can be an issue with plants.
Hmm.
And and there's certainly problems potentially with GMO plants, or there's glyphosate that could be on
Hmm.
the plants, the insecticides, herbicides, whatever. So plants, like, while healthy, they can be bad for you in some ways too. Like, it's a very complex thing. I would say that you can actually be a very healthy vegan. I believe you can be a very healthy carnivore and you can be very healthy in between. It depends on how you're executing it, like how well it's planned out, how whole food you are, and what your lifestyle is like. But neither, like, you can be junk food vegan, you can be
Hmm.
junk food keto, you can be junk food carnivore, you can be junk food a lot of things. Like, so it's
Yeah.
very complex to answer that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think you answered that well, and it definitely is super complex, but I mean, I think it comes back to eating real food and
Yeah.
that being the main focus. Okay, so that was number three. So we have two more, and then I do want to, well, actually, I kind of want to ask you real quick about this while we're on the subject. So with
Okay.
eating real food, right? So
Yeah.
we do know that like our kind of food chain and food supply and the lack of as many, the lack of nutrients in our soil,
Yeah.
maybe nowadays versus 100 years ago is changed. Would you say that, like, is there a specific supplement in terms of that that you would recommend taking as well because specific, and this is more just specifically because maybe within our whole foods that we are consuming now, because they maybe, especially if you're not getting them from a local farmer's market near you and it's, traveling by boat or plane into your grocery store, would there be like a specific supplement or something that we're deficient in because of this, or the top ones?
The biggest thing I would say there is that, I mean, one, you would want to look for obviously organic foods that where either the animals are eating the organic plants or you are eating the organic plant, depending on your diet. That's certainly helpful, and that there is that rich soil that's being turned over and rotated and all that kind of stuff. But one of the biggest things that I would say that's a really interesting one that we need a lot more research on is something called homeostatic soil organisms. And there is a lot of bacteria that's in soil that really affects the absorption of some of these vitamins and minerals. Certainly affects our gut health, affects our microbiome really all over our body. I mean, that's why right now, like going back to the COVID thing, it's actually kind of dangerous in some ways to our immune systems to be so isolated. It's so powerful to the immune system to, have a pet, to interact with other people, to hug them, to touch them, to travel and be exposed to, again, like other microbiota, and then also to be out in the soil. Like that was very important that we touch the earth, that we have the soil in our fingers. And a lot of that is getting rinsed away, and it does affect the uptake of the nutrients, but it also affects so many other things that we're just not clear of. I mean, if you look at like, going back to, kind of like how we thought of vitamin D, and I was telling you how simple and rudimentary that was with bone. Same with like how we think of like the gut. We thought like that was just for, how we digest our food. And then it was like, oh, wait, most of our immune system's there. And then we're like, wait, a lot of our neurotransmitters are there, like serotonin and dopamine and GABA, and then it's becoming like so much more complex with, leaky gut and zonulin and all these different things that it's like, wow, the gut is like, and then they're like, wait, it's truly like our second brain, and then some people are like, maybe it's our first brain, and I mean, it's getting crazy, like with like our gut like really is so important to our health. So I mean, that's a really interesting one, and that kind of would lead into my fourth would be taking pre symbiotics, which would be like prebiotics, things that help feed probiotics, taking the right probiotics, and then even what would be called a postbiotic, which would be like butyrate.
Okay.
And going back to the carnivore diet and why you don't need fiber, which could be, let's say, a prebiotic, why you wouldn't need that, whether you're talking about soluble or insoluble, is that you have butyrate, which helps the gut accomplish what it needs for not only creating, the right gut environment, but also moving things through the gut. So that's like that weird transition that you go through. Like sometimes people talk about diarrhea and all this stuff. It's because you're transitioning over to using butyrate as a fuel for your gut. Now, really interesting thing is you might know beta hydroxybutyrate, right? A key ketone. You're killing it, keto. And BHB is very correlated to B, the butyrate. So one affects the other, and there's actually been studies showing vice versa. Like that the higher your butyrate levels, the higher your BHB levels, and vice versa. So again, that's a whole interesting correlation as well. But that's how like carnivore, people think, oh, you need all these, you need all this fiber. But again, we're not looking at things the same way with the same diets. And,
Yeah.
it's just, it's a very complex, very
Yeah.
complex.
So if you had to recommend how, if someone, because this can be a whole like 15 podcasts probably on its own, but um, with probiotics, is there
Uh-huh.
like something specific? Because I know like there's so many different out there, there's so many different strains, and I feel like sometimes people are just like, I don't even know like what to look for, what to take, what I need for myself. Is there like one specific thing someone can look at or be aware of if they want to, start taking a probiotic?
It's super tough, and to your point, it's crazy, and they've shown that, like even the ones that we thought like they have to be living to work, but now there's studies showing that even the quote unquote dead ones still work. They actually feed the natural probiotics that are present in your gut. And every time you change your diet, by the way, your intestinal microbiome changes pretty radically depending on what you're eating. So that's a whole other thing. But I would say taking like the prebiotics, some of these short chain fibers like FOS that's present in like inulin could be helpful. GOS is another one. And then taking like, I like getting the probiotics that are spore based or microencapsulated because
Okay.
they're super susceptible to heat and light and damage, and that's why some people try and put them in the fridge and like when you go to these stores or whatever, but they still have to be transported. So are they transported cold, all that kind of stuff. And then the colony forming units, the CFUs, is a
Hmm.
factor too of like how strong it is. So I like getting like something that's like a patented form that's already protected. There's one from Deerland Enzymes which makes them, and it's in many different products. That's called DE111, and that's
Okay.
a form that I really like, and it's spore based, so it's protected,
And it
and
doesn't have to
will.
be refrigerated.
Right,
Okay.
right, exactly. So it's stable.
Gotcha.
And again, I think there's a lot of research that's going to be coming out on these homeostatic soil organisms. I think that's super fascinating. And then taking butyrate, you can get sodium butyrate or tributrin. I think that's going to start becoming very popular as taking butyrate as a postbiotic.
Interesting. Okay. Cool. There's so much information in this episode. I'm learning so much. Okay, so, well, I guess that was four, right? So we got one more.
This is tough. I'm going to say, I'm going to give you two more. I'm gonna say a high DHA fish oil, like omega-3 fatty acids, are just really critical to cardiovascular health and brain health. Phospholipids,
Hmm.
just cellular health, and it's been correlated to depression as well. Like um, man, it's massive, and you can look at like DHA with like especially like when the brain is being formed, like with children. So
Hmm.
certainly, if you're pregnant, if you're having, if you've just had your child, like those are critical periods of time to deliver the DHA. But that would be a big one for me.
What would
Um,
you, sorry, I'm interrupting you again,
yeah,
but
no, go ahead.
in terms of fish oil, what would you
Hmm.
recommend? Because there's so many different ones out there. There's, we hear a lot about they can be rancid, so you're not even
Hmm.
getting, what you want to get. Is there a specific form? And then also in terms of the DHA, EPA within that fish oil, is there something to look for specifically on that, like on the label where you have to, have a specific dosage of that?
Yeah, you definitely want like something that's tested for like PCOs, PCBs, heavy metals, that's probably coming from clean waters like these Nordic, type
Hmm.
waters. Um, there's some brands that are really trusted, like Carlson's, Barleans, Nordic Naturals. Those are probably the ones I would look at. Um, Krill oil, I love astaxanthin. That's a really cool antioxidant. And there's debate on the phospholipid forms being more bioavailable than the triglyceride forms that are typical in most of the fish oils, like from anchovies, sardines, mackerel, etc.,
Mhm.
that are in typical fish oils. I feel like krill is a bit overpriced and underdosed, but
Okay.
it's not bad. So I would probably go with like again, like a Nordic Naturals or Barleans or Carlson's, just high DHA. EPA is fine, and then getting several grams combined of the omega-3s a day, like at least 2 or 3 grams of the omega-3s a day.
What about cod liver oil?
So that's good for going back to your fat-soluble vitamins. You're getting some of the benefits of what I'm talking about with the omega-3s, but you're getting a lot of the
Vitamin D.
fat-soluble vitamins as
Yeah.
well. Yeah, exactly. And so
Yeah.
that can be good if
Mhm.
that's a method that you want to go.
Cool. Cool. Okay. So that was your 5A. What's 5B?
Okay, I might have 5B and C now. All right, so it would be creatine, and
Okay.
that might shock you, but we're over 500 studies in, and this is like one of the most studied incredible nutrients. We know about it for high energy phosphates and ATP and explosive movements, and probably you think of it as a muscle building supplement. And certainly it can help with that. And that's important. That can't be underestimated as we age.
Mhm.
Certainly, sarcopenia is a big issue as we age. Protecting that lean body mass, sparing lean body mass, is a huge factor, just like protecting bone mineral density, like we were talking about before. Protecting lean body mass is one of the probably, I think it's one of the like top one or two factors in determining like your longevity. Like
Mhm.
along with like grip strength is like another one, but like lean body mass is massive. But we're finding with creatine that it protects the brain
Mhm.
very dramatically, from traumatic brain injury, and we undergo insults throughout our life, not only like when we fall or get hit in the head, but when we have TIAs or strokes, like what's called mini strokes, when we have depression, like I've had, when we've had like certain parts of your brain can just go dark from like literally just shutting it down and your brain kind of quote unquote protecting itself. And creatine can help protect the brain and help restore the brain. Also, it's been shown to help with eye health, reproductive health, bone health. I mean,
Mhm.
so we're finding that creatine is one of the most important things that you can get as a nutrient. So I feel like it's very underestimated in its importance in the diet and as a nutrient. And I got a 5C for
C.
you, if that's
Okay, I have
okay.
one question about creatine before we get into
Okay.
that. So,
Okay.
creatine, and I think this is something that like a lot of people don't realize too, because you hear most people hear creatine, they're like, oh, muscle building, like only
Yep.
bodybuilders take that and things like that. So I think it's really cool that you hit on that, especially with the research coming out on the brain. So creatine monohydrate, and is that something that's the form that you would suggest? And then in terms of like I know Korea Pure itself is one of the most well-known forms of creatine monohydrate. Is there does it matter which form? Like if you're going, if you're going on Amazon, you're looking up, creatine, you want to, get the cheapest one. Does it matter? Does it need to be monohydrate? Does it need to be Korea Pure? Like, what's your recommendation?
I do recommend creatine monohydrate. And Crea Pure is a German creatine monohydrate. It's branded, it's trusted, it's made well. But I think if you were getting it from a really good company, your creatine monohydrate, like Now Foods, like
Mm-hmm.
Thorne, like Dymatize, or Optimum Nutrition. I think you can trust those. It doesn't need to be Crea Pure, but If it's Creapure, then it's going to be really good. So yes, I would recommend that. And it doesn't matter like if you're worried about like water retention and some of those things
Hmm.
that people worry about, you don't have to load on it. If you load on it, you get to full muscle saturation of creatine phosphate faster.
Hmm.
But that doesn't really matter. They've shown at 5 grams, like 3 to 5 grams a day, that you'll get there like by 28 days.
Hmm.
So that's okay. Like take your time with it. And you can even do divided doses of the 3 to 5 grams a day. So you could just have 1 gram 3 times a day and you'll get there. So it's very easy to take and just add a little bit into a smoothie or, whatever it is that you're doing. And, um, and that's great for your health.
Cool. Awesome. All right. So 5C?
Yes. So this is actually just turning into my top 10, I guess.
Yeah.
That would be alpha GPC. Choline is an incredible vitamin that really is, I mean, phosphatidylcholine you can get like that's lecithin. Then there's choline bitartrate, and there's forms of choline that are cheap, but they don't cross the blood-brain barrier the same way like CDP choline or alpha GPC, which is my most preferred form. Those cross the blood-brain barrier, and choline that's active like that is going to one be an essential part, again going back to brain health and going into the phospholipids of the brain. The brain is mostly fat,
Hmm.
and so that's very important to regulate the brain, give the brain the health that it needs, that sponginess it needs, the neuroplasticity that it needs to learn and be functional. But also a big part of your neurotransmission is acetylcholine. And so choline is going to be a big part of that. So you'll look at like a lot of nootropic stacks, like, people that use raced hams or, Adderall or New Vigil, Provigil, all these different things. They burn through acetylcholine. And therefore, almost all nootropic stacks, the foundation to them will be CDP or alpha GPC choline.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, that was a really good top five, top 10, whatever it may be. Um,
Yes.
okay, well, I had a ton of other questions as well. I wanted to dive into protein powders, but I think that I think I might need to have you on for part two.
Let's just do part
Is that
two. Let's do it.
Well, I think I want the listeners to absorb this because there's a lot of
Right.
information. I don't want to like put too much out there. But I think maybe we can do a part two that just dives into different types of protein powders. Are you up for
Okay.
that? Okay.
I am
So,
totally into that. And we didn't get into like exogenous ketones,
yeah,
which
exactly.
or
I want to do that too.
MCTs.
We'll do
And
that.
then and
Yeah.
then maybe your listeners will just have some questions based on this one. So
Yeah, for
let's
sure.
do it.
I would love to do that. Okay, so ending question for you.
Okay.
Although I still have like so many more, but we'll do part two, maybe part three. Who knows? Okay, so last question for you: Is there anything that you've changed your mind about in the last year, and why? Or what is one
Whoa.
thing? Sorry, one thing you've changed your mind. I just butchered my own question. What is one thing you changed your mind about in the last year, and why?
Man, that's wow, that is literally one of the best questions I think I've ever gotten. And you know what? There's a really good reason I love that supplement because or that question, sorry, is because that question truly means that you're a scientist. I love that because if you're like a zealot, a dogmatic, then you're not a scientist. Like you should constantly be evolving. And if you keep finding like that confirmational bias to say yes, this is like what I've always been saying, so this is the truth. That's not very scientific. So I do love that you're
I love
saying that.
that.
I'm trying to think of what fits there. I think um, Hmm. I think with ketones, exogenous ketones, um, some people worry about whether, and we can dive into this probably deeper, but whether if you take exogenous ketones, if it would affect your endogenous ketone production. So taking supplemental ketones,
Hmm.
would that thereby, kind of like if I was to take injectable testosterone,
Hmm.
okay, exogenous testosterone, um, that my body, my testes would stop making as much um, endogenous testosterone, right? And that
Hmm.
makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So some people worry about that with ketones, and that was something that I wondered about as well. And I think that is actually true to some degree for a short period of time when you're fueling yourself with these exogenous ketones, that your body wouldn't have the need to be breaking down fat to create ketones.
Hmm.
But there's other things that are happening at the same time that when you're deeper in ketosis, that you're upregulating these MCT transporters, the monocarboxylic acid transporter, um, and so that you can use ketones more. You're going to have a higher level of satiety, which means your appetite is lower. So it's affecting things like ghrelin and leptin and neuropeptide Y and all these things associated with appetite. So there's a lot of other things that are going on that I think um, make it very complex, but I think that we can get into it more. But like I've been evolving on my thoughts around exogenous ketones, and I do think they have benefit, but it has to do with dose, timing, strategy, your diet, a
Hmm.
lot of that stuff.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I definitely want to dive into that because that's something that I'm interested in as well. Because like for me, I haven't really dove into exogenous ketones too much. I had Ryan on a previous episode. We talked a little about it. I had Josh Perry on. We talked a little bit about it. But that is a question I get a lot, and for me, it's just something a subject I haven't personally dove into. I don't personally take them, but I do, want to learn more. So yeah, we're gonna have to have a part two
Oh,
if
and
you're
then
down
there's
for it.
the different isomers and
Yeah,
salts and yeah, all that stuff. So
yeah.
yeah,
But
we can talk
I
about it.
get those questions a lot, so it'd be nice to record an episode, and get your, expertise on that. And then also I get a lot of questions about protein powders and the different types and all that. So yeah,
Gluconeogenesis.
yeah, and
Yep,
all that jazz.
yep. Okay,
Sweet.
let's do it.
All right. Well, so if you're listening, there will be a part two, maybe part three. Who knows? Sweet. All
All
right.
right.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. Do you want to, do you have anything like cool coming up, like within your business or anything on the horizon that you want to share?
Well, I rebranded myself as the ingredientologist, so
Cool.
I'm available on all forms of social media at ingredientologist. That's the science of ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a book coming out later this year that I'm working on that's currently named The Energy Formula. That's
Oh.
that how I bounce back and what I've done to put energy back in my life. And we can actually talk about mitochondrial health next time
Mm.
and insufficient cellular energy, which is a topic I love.
Mm.
Um, and I think that's about it. Like I was going to be at about 10 different conferences, speaking at 10 different things on 10 different topics, but all that seems to be thrown out the window right now. So
Yeah. Ugh, it's, it's a bummer. But well, maybe we can record 10 podcasts on those
there you
things if
go.
you want.
There you
That'd
go.
be
Let's
fun.
do it. Let's do it.
Sweet, awesome. Well, I will definitely link your Instagram because I know you've been coming out with tons of cool graphics. And I mean, I've been, I just go search through your Instagram whenever I have a question about anything because it's like all of the supplements there, your graphics are super cool and super relatable. Like, you don't need to, understand really the science behind things. You break it down into layman's terms. So I love that. So I'll definitely link those in the show notes at Ingredientologist on Instagram and your website and all that.
Yeah, and then I have these guides on my site, ShawnWells.com. You can get there by ingredientologist.com as well, but I'm putting up weekly guides on all this content. So, like, I have a guide, like 5 to 10 pages cited on vitamin C, on vitamin D3, on anti-nutrients like lectins, on fasting for women, all kinds of stuff. So, yeah, check it out.
Awesome, awesome. All right, I'll definitely link that. And if you're listening and you have any other questions about supplements, check out Shawn's website for sure. Awesome. Well, I'm so happy that you came on. This was an amazing episode, and I can't wait to have you back for part two, three, four, and five.
I will be back.
All right, sounds good. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, bye.
Bye.